course, Hollywood actors and writers remain on strike. I want to now bring in Domenic Romano over at the Romano Law Firm, following the very latest, with the very latest updates on what's happening over there as we continue to follow that strike over in Hollywood, really paralyzing the creative industries there. Good morning, Domenic. Thanks so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. I appreciate it. Want to jump right into it this morning. Really, what's at stake here for the movie studios now as actors join with the writers on strike?
It's money for the studios. You're looking at the equivalent, if we're using the last strike, the 1980 strike as a guide, the equivalent of $148 million per day in today's dollars could cost, according to one analyst estimate, $4 billion to the studios before the dust settles here, after all is said and done.
And as A-list actor Kevin Bacon said of the strike, he said he can negotiate on his own, but he said that he's striking for the working class actors. What does that make up in terms of Hollywood?
Yeah, the vast majority, actually. 87% of actors in the union make less than $26,000 a year. So basically the stars are aligning and getting together for the rank and file.
And who are the rank and file then in Hollywood? Who can you describe as being kind of one of those rank and file actors? Are they extras? Are they
not necessarily the overwhelming majority? Most actors, the public doesn't really understand it. When you think of actors, you think of these big stars earning exorbitant amounts of money. Most actors do not make enough money to live on. Most actors the overwhelming majority of actors have other jobs. Most actors earn less. The amount I mentioned before, $26,000 a year, that's less than the minimum amount necessary to qualify for health insurance. You know, the average actor in the United States makes just a little over $20 an hour, but the work is irregular. And so what the actors are striking for is greater pay, greater benefits, and setting up guardrails against artificial intelligence. And you know, the actors are not happy that these studio executives are seeing massive pay increases year over year, while their effective earning is shrinking and hasn't been going up.
What do you think boiled up, especially after actors haven't gone on strike in some 60 years? What led us to this point specifically?
Well, the last actor strike was in 1980, but it's been 60 years since you've seen both unions simultaneously striking. I believe the writers and the actors simultaneously. And I think, you know, a lot has happened in that time. Obviously, distribution has been turned over. Cable, the advent of cable, and now streaming services have become the default model for distribution of movies and television. And actors' residuals, you know, under the old network model, haven't kept up. Compensations for replay of episodes, for example, or movies have shrunk dramatically for the average actor. And this dynamic now has existed for decades, as you pointed out. It's been years, 60 years, since we've seen a strike of this magnitude and of this coordination. And since then, streaming and social media has supplanted the more traditional modes of entertainment. And this has resulted in essentially the shift of even more power. Studios and networks always had power, but now they have, you know, enormous power vis-a-vis the act in comparison to the actors. So the residuals that actors once received, residual, a term for repeat play, is now being replaced by, you know, a relatively meager buyout, a one-time payment. And so actors are getting pennies for streaming where they would have got dollars for a traditional network replay. And so, you know, traditionally that residual revenue could help actors pay for rent, pay for other living expenses. Today, that's no longer the case for the overwhelming majority of actors.
So do you think the argument then by both actors and writers in this fight, is it a fair one?
Well, I think it's important to see both sides. The actors are saying, we're not being paid enough. And the studios, the organization representing the studios, is saying, look, we've got competition now from places like TikTok and other social media platforms and gaming. We have a fragmented audience. And, we are taking all the risk. And, they're saying that ad revenue is drying up because of the competition. And on the other hand, though, the actors are saying, look, as I mentioned before, CEO pay, entertainment CEOs are making unprecedented amounts of money. And we're seeing dynamic pay increases year over year for these chief executives. And we shouldn't have to pay for their poor business decisions. For example, that the AT&T Time Warner Discovery merger, arguably that saddled that company with billions of dollars of debt while its stock prices decreased. And actors are looking at this dynamic and they're shrinking residuals and they're saying, hey, what about us? At the end of the day, I think actors are going to end up receiving more money. The organization representing motion pictures and networks has said, look, they've offered $1 billion of additional residuals and AI protection, and the actors have rejected that. It's a PR campaign on both sides, but we're going to very likely see this thing end either by Labor Day or by the end of September. We're going to very likely see a dramatic pay increase for actors, greater protections for actors. We're going to see probably increased benefits. We're going to see some protections against AI to a certain measure. A lot of that, policing that is still unknown. But who's going to pay for it? Ultimately, the public. It'll cost you and I more to consume content, in all likelihood.
And as we look at the issue now of AI as well as the capital, obviously the money, actors and writers asking for so much, asking for more. What's the issue there with AI, and what are actors asking for specifically?
Well, they are asking that they be compensated for the AI consuming their interpretations, their images, and the writers more than the actors. But both organizations of the creatives, both unions are saying, look, we need some kind of assurance and some kind of compensation that we are going to participate in basically machine creation, because the inputs, right, the inputs that are going into the AI, the actors' voices, for example, the scripts, the actors' interpretations being used by machine learning or artificial intelligence to create something new, they should be compensated for those inputs. And I think a lot of the media organizations like the New York Times and others are reportedly looking at licensing their content for the consumption of AI, so they can monetize, they can have some kind of revenue model in which to participate in this next generation of creativity that's going to be machine assisted.
Certainly opening new avenues, but obviously likeness being kind of at the center of that debate, and certainly people want to make sure that if either their creative work or even their image is being used, not just in that single shoot that they do, that it can be that they also are paid if it's used later. Of course, I know there's been the argument, and I don't know how founded you may believe this is, but the argument that movie studios might come in and film a few extras and then essentially use their images in perpetuity. Is that something that you think is happening, and is that the concern, especially from the actors?
Yeah, the actors, creatives, writers are very concerned about this next generation of technology, that they're essentially going to, like you said, lose control of their image, their voice, their likeness. For example, my brother, Romano is a voiceover artist, does voice for networks and motion picture promotions and things of that nature. He and other people in the voiceover industry are concerned with the use of inputs of their voices being regenerated for different purposes. And I think that's a very legitimate concern for writers, for voice actors, for regular actors, for extras, as you pointed out. And is there evidence that's happening? Um, to a certain extent, yes. Just visit ChatGPT, type in a famous person's name or a writer's name, and have it spit out something in the voice or the style of that writer, and see what it generates. So it's happening now. AI is consuming original image, likeness, and voice, and creating something different without compensation to the originator of that creativity. And that's a concern for creatives.
Now, with the actors also joining the writers on strike, how urgent do you think the need is for some sort of resolution to come, especially as many Hollywood movies, TV shows have already been delayed because of the writers being on strike?
I think it's quite urgent. It has the ability to really put a stranglehold on the city of Los Angeles and other places that are dependent on the industry. I think both sides would like to see a resolution, but I think they're not willing to compromise on what's important to them. They will have to compromise, and that compromise will most likely take place in September. I don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but that's my best guess.
We'll all wait and see, and I'm sure we'll be speaking much later as this continues on. Domenic Romano over there at the Romano Law Firm in New York City, managing partner there. Thanks so much for joining us. Anything I didn't ask you, anything you want to add?
Thanks, Giacomo. I think that, hopefully this will resolve the issue for years to come, but it's easy to see how both sides are concerned with the future here.
Absolutely. Certainly a lot to consider as this new technology comes out, and obviously pay, always a big talker there. Domenic Romano there with the Romano Law Firm. Thanks so much for joining us.